New tonight, a World War II submarine missing for 75 years has been found off the coast of Japan.
The Vanishing. For more than 70 years, the ocean kept it secret. A World War II submarine, one of the most advanced of its time, disappeared without a trace somewhere in the vast waters of the Atlantic. No distress signals, no survivors, no wreckage floating on the surface. It was as if the vessel and its crew had simply vanished into the abyss. Families of the sailors mourned without closure, and historians debated endlessly. Was it sunk in combat? Did a mechanical failure send it plunging to the depths? Or had it been deliberately erased from history because of what it carried? The submarine in question was rumored to be no ordinary vessel. Naval archives hinted at a final mission cloaked in secrecy. Its orders were vague, the destination unclear, and the cargo logs, classified even decades after the war, were riddled with redactions. Some speculated that the submarine had been transporting experimental weaponry. Others whispered about darker cargo, artifacts seized during the Nazi plunder of Europe, objects steeped in myth and mystery. But without evidence, these claims were dismissed as rumor. Then, in the early months of the 21st century, technology finally caught up with the mystery. A privately funded expedition, equipped with advanced sonar and remotely operated vehicles, set out to scan one of the last, unexplored stretches of ocean where the submarine was believed to have disappeared. For weeks, they found nothing but barren sea and endless silence. Morale sank, and the expedition was close to being abandoned. Then came the ping. The sonar picked up an unnatural shape on the ocean floor, long, metallic, unmistakably man-made. The team erupted in excitement. They had done what countless others failed to achieve. They had found the lost submarine. The coordinates were locked, and the remotely operated drone was launched into the water. Its lights cut through the crushing darkness, illuminating the long shadow of the vessel. At first glance, it appeared remarkably intact. Unlike many wartime wrecks which lay in twisted ruins, this submarine rested upright on the sea, as though it had settled there deliberately. Its hull was scarred, yes, but not shattered. The conning tower jutted upward, defiant against the currents, and the propellers remained perfectly aligned. To the experts watching the feed on their monitors, it looked less like a wreck and more like a ship waiting silently in harbor. But there was something unsettling about its preservation. The paint, though worn, was still visible. The insignias etched along the side could still be made out clearly. Time had done far less damage than expected. The historian on board muttered, almost to himself, "It should not look like this after 70 years." The drone circled the vessel, its cameras capturing every detail. The hatches were sealed shut, the periscope bent but still recognizable. The only immediate sign of trauma was a large impact mark near the bow, as though something massive had struck it head-on. But no torpedo damage, no gaping holes from depth charges. The cause of its sinking remained a mystery. The crew debated whether to attempt entry. Protocol demanded caution, yet curiosity gnawed at them. After all, this was not just a piece of history, it was a time capsule. If the submarine had indeed gone down intact, the interior could hold secrets untouched since the day it vanished. Journals, personal effects, mission documents. Anything could be waiting inside. The lead scientist finally gave the order. The drone was fitted with a manipulator arm, which reached for the submarine's forward hatch. The steel resisted at first, but with a slow groan, the hatch gave way. A burst of silt clouded the water as the sealed interior was breached for the first time in decades. As the drone's lights pierced the opening, silence filled the control room. Every expert leaned closer to their monitors, hearts pounding. They expected rusted corridors and the skeletal remains of sailors long gone. Instead, they saw something that made the room fall deadly quiet. The interior looked untouched. Pipes gleamed faintly. Wiring hung neatly from the ceiling. Papers floated lazily in the water, still legible. And then, as the drone pushed deeper, a shadow drifted across the lens. Something moving inside the submarine, where no living thing should be. The control room erupted in disbelief. "Run it back," one shouted. But when the footage replayed, the shadow was gone. The silence that followed was suffocating. What was moving inside a submarine sealed for 70 years? Into the iron coffin. The opening of the hatch was supposed to be the moment of triumph. After all, countless expeditions had scoured the seas for this lost submarine, and now a single robotic drone was sliding silently into history. But the mood inside the control room was no longer celebratory. What they saw inside the submarine was not the expected graveyard of rust and ruin. Instead, it was an environment that looked strangely preserved, as though time itself had paused the moment the vessel went under. The drone's cameras adjusted, illuminating the narrow corridor that stretched ahead. The walls were lined with pipes, gauges, and valves that still glistened faintly in the artificial light. It looked like a scene ripped from 1943 and frozen in amber. Even the posters pasted to the wall, wartime propaganda urging courage and discipline, remained intact, their ink barely faded. The experts exchanged uneasy glances. The Atlantic Ocean should have stripped these artifacts bare decades ago. As the drone drifted forward, the first human presence revealed itself: a boot. Floating slightly above the floor, its leather cracked but shockingly intact. The operator nudged the drone closer, and what came next silenced the entire team. Attached to the boot was a leg bone, perfectly preserved, still wrapped in the tattered remains of a uniform. The skeleton was slumped against the wall, one arm extended as if it had reached out in its final moments. The historian whispered, almost reverently, "These men are still here." The reality hit hard. Dozens of sailors had been sealed in this iron coffin, trapped when the submarine went down. Their families had long accepted their deaths, but no one had imagined the crew still sat silently below, their remains perfectly preserved in the dark. The drone moved deeper, drifting past rows of skeletal figures still seated at their stations. One man was slumped over the radio equipment, headphones still around his skull. Another clutched a journal, its pages fluttering in the faint current. The operator tried to zoom in, but the writing was in German script, blurred by water. Still, a few words were legible verbatim: "Forbidden." That word alone sent shivers through the team. It became clear that the submarine had not simply been lost. It had been entombed with its secrets. But what were those secrets? Why had the interior remained so intact? And what was the shadow that flickered just minutes earlier across the camera feed? The drone turned into the main control room, where the captain's chair sat bolted to the floor. The skeleton that occupied it was upright, almost regal, its empty sockets staring toward the periscope. The jaw was slightly open, giving the impression of a scream frozen in time. In its hand was a pistol, rusted but recognizable. "Did Hill?" one of the technicians began, but his voice faltered. It looked very much like the captain had turned the gun on himself after realizing there was no escape. Yet no bullet damage could be seen on the skull. Had he been planning to use it, or had he simply clung to it until the last breath? The air in the control room on the ship above seemed to grow heavier. Every new discovery was more disturbing than the last, but nothing compared to what they found in the aft storage compartment. As the drone pushed its way past another sealed hatch, it entered a narrow room lined with crates. Most were ordinary supply boxes, food tins, spare parts, medicine, but a row of 6 heavy steel containers sat at the far end, their surfaces marked with strange insignias. Not standard naval markings, but symbols, triangular, occult-like designs scorched into the metal. The historian gasped. "Those are not military. Those are something else." The team urged the drone closer. The manipulator arm brushed against one of the crates, and the camera feed shook slightly as the silt clouded the compartment. When it cleared, they saw the lid of one container had already been forced open, perhaps during the sinking, or maybe long before. Inside, glimmers of gold caught the light. Treasure. But there was something else mixed among the golden objects, a small, misshapen idol carved from black stone, its features grotesque and almost inhuman. Even through the camera, the object seemed unsettling. The longer they looked at it, the more wrong it felt. Its eyes seemed to follow, its twisted grin mocking. The historian leaned back, pale. "That is not supposed to be here. That is not European. That looks ancient." Speculation erupted. Had the Nazis been transporting looted artifacts of occult significance? Was this submarine's mission tied not to warfare, but to the smuggling of something far stranger? Then the operator froze. The shadow was back. This time, it was not a flicker. As the drone's light swept the compartment, a distinct shape passed in front of the lens. It was not debris, not a trick of current. It was the silhouette of something moving deliberately, and it was inside the submarine with the drone. The operator's hands trembled on the controls. "Pull it out," someone said. "Now." But before the drone could reverse course, the feed crackled, flickered, and went dark. The control room erupted in chaos. Years of searching, millions spent on equipment, and now, total silence. The submarine lay below, but whatever had been disturbed within it was no longer content to remain unseen. And for the first time, the experts began to wonder if they had made a mistake opening that hatch at all. The debate above the deep. The control room had fallen into a tense silence, broken only by the hum of the ship's generators and the frantic static from the dead drone feed. Everyone on board stared at the black screen, waiting for it to return, hoping for even a flicker of light or a final glimpse of the submarine's interior. But there was nothing. The drone was gone, and with it, the live window into the past had slammed shut. For a moment, no one dared to speak. Then the lead engineer slammed his hand against the console. That was $1 million piece of equipment. He growled, though his frustration was less about money and more about what they had just lost. The evidence, the chance to confirm what their eyes swore they had seen. The historian leaned forward, whispering almost to himself, "That shadow, it moved. Not drifted, it moved." His words sent a chill through the room. Some tried to rationalize. Perhaps it had been a trick of the current, debris dislodged when the drone bumped against the crates. Perhaps the electromagnetic interference deep below had scrambled the feed. But the truth was unavoidable. The drone had been fully operational, and then, in the middle of revealing something they should not have been seeing, it had simply died. The mission's director, a woman who had spent her life leading deep-sea expeditions, stood with her arms crossed. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed unease. "We have two choices," she said. "We either send down another drone to confirm what happened, or we consider sending divers." The room erupted in protest. Human divers at that depth? It was unthinkable. The submarine lay nearly 4 kilometers beneath the waves, far beyond the reach of any diver. Only specially designed submersibles could withstand the crushing pressure, and even then, it would be a gamble. The director raised her hand to quiet the arguments. "Before we do anything reckless, we need to decide if the risk is worth it. Let us remember what we are dealing with here. This submarine is not simply a relic, it is a tomb. And those crates, those artifacts, we may have stumbled onto something that goes beyond naval history. If the Nazis were transporting objects like that idol..." She trailed off, her words heavy with implication. The historian picked up the thread. The Third Reich was obsessed with the occult. They looted artifacts from across Europe, Africa, even Asia. Hitler believed in symbols and relics that could grant power. That idol we saw, it did not belong in a submarine. It belonged in some ancient temple, perhaps buried for centuries before they stole it. And if that is true, then what else could be sealed in those crates? A young technician, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. His voice shook. "Did anyone else notice how the skeletons looked? They should have been decomposed, stripped to bare bone. But some were almost intact, like they had not been dead for 80 years. The room grew colder. No one wanted to say it out loud, but the implication was clear. Time inside that submarine was not behaving the way it should. objects preserved, bodies unnaturally intact, an idol that seemed to radiate dread, and a shadow that had no business existing at the bottom of the ocean. Finally, the director made the call. We cannot walk away. History will never forgive us if we do. We launch the secondary drone. If the interference continues, we document it. If we lose this one too, we reassess. But we are not abandoning this discovery. The crew moved quickly, their tension masked by routine. The second drone, sleeker and fitted with a stronger transmission system, was lowered into the sea. Its descent took nearly 2 hours, the cameras relaying the endless blackness of the Atlantic Trench. On the surface, the team watched in silence, their faces lit only by the glow of the monitors. Finally, the drone touched down near the broken hull of the submarine. The wreck loomed out of the darkness, its steel skin scarred by war, its conning tower half buried in the seabed. It was less a ship now and more a tombstone, waiting for intruders to dare disturb it again. The operator carefully guided the drone through the same hatch as before. The interior looked identical, preserved corridors, rusted machinery, skeletons frozen mid-action. Yet as the drone moved deeper, the feed began to distort, flickers of static creeping across the screen. The crew tensed. They had seen this before. Then came the sound. It was faint, distant, and warped by interference but unmistakable, a metallic clang echoing through the submarine. Everyone froze. The submarine was sealed. Nothing should move down there. Nothing should make a sound. The historian whispered, "There is something still alive down there." The drone pressed onward, its camera turning back toward the aft storage compartment. The crates loomed ahead, waiting like silent guardians. But something was different this time. The lid of another crate was open, one that had been sealed shut before, and lying in front of it was not treasure, not gold, not artifacts. It was another skeleton. But this one was not slumped, not frozen in a desperate position. Its bones were twisted and shattered, its skull crushed as though something had broken free from inside the crate and destroyed it. The operator's hands trembled. That skeleton was not there before, he whispered. The historian's face drained of color. Then we are not alone in that submarine. The unsealed crates. The silence inside the control room was unbearable. Every creak of the research vessel above sounded like a scream against the stillness of the deep. On the monitors, the second drone hovered in front of the shattered skeleton, its bones scattered unnaturally, like a puppet torn apart. The broken crate behind it gaped open, its interior pitch black despite the floodlights. The operator hesitated, his fingers hovering over the controls, unwilling to push closer. The historian leaned in, his voice hoarse. That crate was sealed for a reason. They were transporting something they did not want anyone to see. And now, 80 years later, it is not gone. It is out. The operator reluctantly edged the drone forward. Its light spilled into the crate. Inside lay fragments of gold coins, jewelry, and artifacts, clearly looted treasures. But they were scattered, secondary. What dominated the space was a stone carving, jagged and uneven, its surface covered in symbols none of them recognized. It resembled no known language, a series of spirals and claw-like etchings. And worst of all, the carving was split in half, as if something had forced its way through. The historian recoiled. That is not man-made. That is something older. The director, her knuckles white as she gripped the table, cut in sharply. Focus on the environment. We need to know if this is contamination from wartime or something natural. Do not leap to conclusions. But even as she spoke, another sound reverberated through the feed. A scraping, low and deliberate, like metal dragged across metal. The drone's camera whipped around, its light slicing through the corridor behind it. Nothing was there. The skeleton sat still, their empty sockets staring, their bony hands frozen in endless gestures of desperation. Yet the sound continued, closer now, echoing from every direction. The operator's breath quickened. "There's movement," he said. "I swear there's something moving behind the drone." On the monitors, faint distortions shimmered across the video feed. At first they seemed like static, harmless interference. But then the distortion took shape. For a split second, a humanoid outline flickered across the screen, elongated limbs bending at unnatural angles before vanishing again into the black. The room erupted in murmurs. "Rewind it," the director demanded. "Replay that frame." The footage rolled back in slow motion. And there it was, a figure, taller than a man, its head tilted at a grotesque angle, its body warped as if it were not built for this world. The historian whispered, "That idol, that black stone figure we saw earlier. This thing looks like it." The crew exchanged horrified glances. Could it be that the artifact had not been symbolic, but representative? That the submarine's crew had been carrying not just gold and loot, but something alive, or at least something that could become alive? The drone operator fought the urge to pull back. Instead, he guided the machine deeper into the compartment, edging past the crates toward the rear bulkhead. And that was when the cameras revealed something none of them had anticipated. Carved directly into the steel wall of the submarine was a series of symbols, identical to those on the cracked stone carving. The metal had been scorched, as if branded from the inside out. And in front of the symbols lay a pile of bones, not arranged by accident but deliberately stacked. Like an offering, gasps filled the room. This was not just a military transport, the historian said. The crew was guarding something, or worshipping it. The director snapped, "Stop with the speculation. This is still evidence. We are documenting, not inventing myths." But her voice wavered. Before anyone could argue, the scraping noise surged again, louder, angrier. The drone's feed shook violently, as though something had struck it. The lights flickered, and the operator cursed, trying to stabilize the machine. For a moment, the camera went black. When it flickered back, the image froze the blood of everyone watching. One of the skeletons was no longer slumped against the wall. It was standing. The bones, once lifeless, were now upright, its skull tilted toward the drone, empty sockets locked on the camera. And as the crew watched in disbelief, the skeleton's jaw opened. A sound erupted through the feed. Not the crackle of interference, but a guttural, unnatural wail that shook the speakers in the control room. The operator screamed, jerking the controls, sending the drone spiraling backward through the corridor. But even as it retreated, the cameras caught more movement. One by one, skeletons began to stir, heads turned, fingers twitched, bodies slowly rose from the positions they had been frozen in for decades. The historian staggered back from the monitor, whispering, "They are not dead, not all the way. That thing had kept them." The director barked, "Pull the drone out! Now!" But the feed cut again, replaced by static. The control room was filled with the shrill sound of alarms as the transmission collapsed entirely. They had lost another drone. This time, however, it was not interference. The last image burned into their minds was undeniable skeletons moving inside the submarine, their empty sockets watching, their broken bones animated by something that should never have survived the war. And for the first time, the director's iron mask of professionalism cracked. She whispered the thought that none of them wanted to say aloud. What if we have just woken them up? The awakening below the control room felt like it was suffocating. The hum of the equipment, once comforting, now seemed like a dirge echoing through a coffin. Everyone stood frozen, the final image of skeletal figures rising inside the submarine replaying over and over in their minds. No one wanted to admit it aloud, but they all knew the same truth. Something unnatural had been disturbed. The director slammed the emergency kill switch, cutting all power to the drone's channel. "We are aborting. No more equipment, no more risks. We log what we have, we report it, and we leave." Her tone was sharp, but it trembled at the edges. The historian stepped forward, his voice strained. "We cannot just leave. Do you understand what this means? This is not just a shipwreck anymore. It is evidence of something beyond history. If those men are moving, if those relics kept them from rotting—" "Enough!" the director snapped. "Those were corpses reacting to currents and distortion. Nothing more. We will not spread hysteria. But no one believed her. Not really. The images were too clear, the sound too visceral. The young technician whispered, almost childlike, "They were looking at us." They knew the drone was there. That was the moment the ship itself groaned. A deep vibration rattled through the hull, startling the crew. Everyone froze. It was not machinery, it was external, something from below. The sonar officer scrambled to his console, his fingers flying across the controls. The display lit up with readings, but what they showed made his face go pale. "There is movement down there," he stammered. Large, multiple rising from the wreck. The director rushed to his side, her eyes narrowing. "Marine life." He shook his head, trembling. "No, not marine life. These are shapes. Human-sized, dozens of them." A chill swept through the room. On the monitors, sonar waves painted a nightmare. Figures were emerging from the submarine, rising slowly into the water column. At first, they drifted like debris, but soon their movements became deliberate, controlled. And they were coming upward. Panic spread among the crew. Orders clashed with fear as some demanded the ship leave immediately, while others argued they needed to document what was happening. The historian, trembling but determined, insisted, "If we run, no one will believe us. We need proof. This could be the most important discovery in history." The director's face was ashen. "This is not discovery. This is survival. We leave now." She barked orders to the bridge, but before the engines could engage, the ship shuddered violently. The sound of scraping metal echoed from below. It felt as though something had latched onto the hull. The crew rushed to the deck, floodlights cutting across the dark waves. At first, there was nothing but the rolling black sea. Then one of the lights caught something pale breaking the surface. A skull. It rose slowly, water streaming from its empty sockets, its jaw hanging open in silent mockery. Then another, and another. Dozens of skeletal figures breached the surface, their bones glowing faintly in the artificial light. Seaweed clung to their ribs, barnacles crusted their skulls, but their movements were unmistakable. They were climbing, hauling themselves upward as though the sea no longer bound them. The crew screamed. Some stumbled back, others rushed to arm themselves with whatever they could grab, tools, flares, anything. The historian stood frozen, muttering to himself like a man losing his grip on sanity. They are soldiers still serving something, obeying something. From the water came a sound that silenced them all. It was not human, not natural. A low, guttural chant rolled across the waves, as though dozens of mouths spoke in unison, carrying words in that same unknown language etched into the submarine's walls. The sound made the air vibrate, a primal resonance that struck